My view was that we would have enough scientific-based presentation, so I would focus on the policy perspective. But before my current position as a senior advisor of the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment, I was a deputy director for research at the Met Office in the Netherlands, and also director for strategy. And from that occupation, I always take with me some information about the climate system. What you see here is a picture of the climate system. There's incoming radiation. I don't know. It's incoming radiation. It's going down, reflected by clouds and by aerosols and things like that. But a big part of it is coming down to the ground and warming up the Earth. In a reflection, it's radiated outside, partly as transpiration, energy is used, but also direct radiation outside. Part of it is captured in, part of it is just going through directly, and part of it is captured by the atmospheric system, by the greenhouse gases, for instance. What we know is that water vapor is the most common greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, but our problem now is related to the CO2. Well, by keeping this warmth, the atmosphere is heating, and the capacity for the atmosphere to contain water vapor is increasing. So I agree with the previous speaker that the hydrological cycle will increase, speed up. But the good news is that there will be more fresh water available, because what goes up will be more evaporation, but come down. So there will be more fresh water. So that's the good news. And the bad news is that we don't know where and how it will fall. Next slide. Well, the climate system is a very complex system. It's powered by incoming solar radiation, and there's numerous linkages and feedback. So it's very difficult to model and to be complete in your modeling. But it's because with all linkages and feedbacks, it's causing internal variability on various timescales. We all know the difference in the weather today and tomorrow are never the same. We have the seasons, and on a longer period we have better dry summers, and also El Niño is also an internal phenomenon that is causing variations. What we like to see is the climate variability as a Gaussian distribution. And because of climate change, especially politicians think that just the mean will shift. So we'll have more extremes on the hot side and less extremes on the cold side. But it also might very well be that the shape of the distribution changes. You know, it will flatten a bit. There's a second picture that you might see. And if you find a combination of that, you see that we might have much more and much fierce extremes on the hot side, but we still might suffer and experience extremes on the cold side. So maybe the variability is increasing, maybe the distribution is increasing, we don't know. So then about the climate system. And now I want to focus on the adaptation policy and planning. What we face as policymakers is that if you are working on this issue, everybody has an opinion about adaptation to climate change. Everybody has its own interest, and they want to be heard, and they want to be taken up in the solutions. We do know about the challenge. The challenge is about weather and climate. We face a shift in mean that's very likely, and you might have more and more fierce extremes on the wet side, on the dry side, on the cold side, and maybe also on the hot side, and maybe also on the cold side. The effects will be hazards, and they're taking most of attention, but we shouldn't forget the slow onsets. The slow and the degradation of agricultural fields. Less yields, every year a bit less, every year a bit less crop. You have growing water stress, and it also goes very slowly, every year a bit less. And over years you find that in the end the changes are quite significant. It will cause instability and conflict at the end. But let's not forget that also chances will occur, and don't forget to use them. The response to this hazards and slow onsets is that we should mobilize technology, finance and governance for climate smart development. It's pretty much assumed that technology is needed for solutions and also finance to make it. But we forget often that also governance and good institutional arrangement are necessary to make it work. And climate smart development is not just about adapting to climate change, but it's adding climate proofing to current developments. So there are three parts of it. First, we have to adapt. This reduce vulnerability and increase resilience. Second one is to anticipate and we integrate adaptation in a development policy. And second or third is that we should include. That's about governance. We should engage political will and local power. Gender, the knowledge, local and indigenous knowledge, and should stimulate joint fact-finding, so to increase a common base for where we can work on two solutions. Looking at the policy level, we have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's the basic and the most important international document on climate change. It was established in 1992 and it's mostly on mitigation, how to reduce emissions. But also there are in the original document a few paragraphs about adaptation. And I quote one, that is that parties should cooperate in preparing for adaptation to the impact of climate change. And we all know there are negotiators, politicians, and there are good words and interesting words, but they should come to work. But the focus of all the attention under the climate convention was on mitigation for long years. It took us about until 2006, 15 to 14 years later, to get some momentum basically from developing countries to have more attention for adaptation to climate change. They were facing already and feeling the consequences of climate change. And it was recognized that the work on mitigation would not prevent us from having climate change. Climate change will occur, so we have to adapt. So that strong activity on adaptation eventually led to the Cancun Adaptation Framework. It was adapted by the Conference of the Parties of UNFCCC in 2010, and it said that adaptation must be addressed with the same level of priority as mitigation. Well, for us that is not too much, but on the policy level that's a landslide, and that we should have adaptation on the same level as mitigation. But mostly of that is also words, it is still words. And still by now, adaptation doesn't have the same attention as mitigation under the Framework Convention. But to make it work, they also established the Adaptation Committee. And the Adaptation Committee is the instrument for the UNFCCC to increase public awareness about risk reduction, vulnerabilities and hazards, and achieve commitment for public authorities. I'm involved in the work of the Adaptation Committee, and the Adaptation Committee mandate basically focuses on promotion of coherence and adaptation under the Convention and synergies with organizations, centers and networks. So that's internal looking for the UNFCCC to bring all efforts on adaptation together, to work together on adaptation and make it stronger. The second one is to provide technical support and guidance on adaptation actions and on means of implementation. That are basically workshops, guidelines, available for everyone to work on adaptation. The third one is to raise awareness and share information about adaptation. The focus of work currently is on the process toward national adaptation plans. And the UNFCCC, the AC, together with the LEG and another part of the UNFCCC, made national adaptation plan guidelines. It's about a document of this size, this thick, 2 or 3 centimeters, full of essential tips and ways to move forward. And you can assure one thing, that if you follow this adaptation guideline, this national adaptation plan guideline, you will never reach the end. It's that much comprising that if you do that, you will be working always towards a plan and never reach the end. So that was understood by the UNFCCC as well. They say it's not a mandatory plan. You should take the issues and the actions that you can use it for making a national adaptation plan. By that way, it's going to work. It's quite useful. I took it myself to work out on a plan for a small area, and it works. You can find this document, these guidelines, on the internet address that I put down below. Well, to make it work, I took a concrete example of how it works. And It's adaptation in the Netherlands. I come from the Netherlands and it's an interesting place to be. Next to this text, there should be a picture of the Netherlands. I hope it will occur, but it didn't so far. There it is. What you see in the Netherlands are in an international catchment of 3 big rivers, the Rhine, the Meuse, and the Scheldt River. For us, they are big rivers, but maybe on world size, I think the 3 together are smaller than the Amazon River. But for us, it's an issue. It's 3 rivers together, and about 60% of our country is flood prone. The blue area will flood if there were no dikes. And in this area is the economic center of our country. So if the dikes break, we are out of business. 9 million people will drown, and the bigger part of our GDP will be lost. But to prevent that from happening, we have a system of about 3,500 kilometers of flood defenses, hundreds of flood sluices, and pumping stations to keep our country dry. You can imagine that there's a big effort, and over the years we work on this. And our policy is towards decreased exposure and vulnerability. That means that we build a physical system more robust to cope with climate change, to keep the water out, but also to prevent us from climate change. That's about technology, spatial planning, things like that. It's about infrastructure, early warning systems. But the second part is that we should increase resilience. That means that we have to make society, the economy, the ecosystem more robust to cope with climate change. It's about humanities, it's about governance, it's about agility to cope. There's a political level issue as well. In the Netherlands, we have a lot of experience with floods. In 1916, in the last century, there was a big flood with water from the sea. In 1926, we had another flood from the riverside. Interesting is the difference between these 2 pictures. As you might see, this picture and this picture are quite different. There is land here, there's dam here, and this part has been forward as well. So what we did in response to a flood, we make our country strong. We closed the lagoon, we built some boulders and strong dikes. Second goes after 1926, the river dikes were increased and strengthened. But in 1953, it was, the dikes failed again, now in the central part of the Netherlands. It was water from the sea, and Rotterdam, our big harbour, is about here, so it came pretty close. This flooding was the start of our Delta plan to close all the sea gates and to work on a resilient and strong Netherlands in the southern part. In 1995, we almost had the flooding, it just went right from rivers this time. So, like I said, we have experience with flooding, but we never get used to it. To keep our country dry, we have a system of legal standards, legal and periodic assessment, all arranged by law. Flood protection improvement programs, water boards, Rijkswaterstaat on the national level and the water boards are at the regional level. But all this doesn't prevent us from being flooded once and now and never once again. This is a schematic picture of the Netherlands. And what you see what will happen, threats, is that the sea level might rise. That there will be increasing erosion because of that sea level rise. You have more extreme storms, always a danger for our flood defense, also inducing increased erosion. By the sea level rise, the sea level will be high. We have more salt intrusion that will hamper our agricultural fields. There is land subsidence. There's a residue, a heritage from the last ice age. The Netherlands are going down and Scandinavia is coming up. We have spatial developments in the Netherlands, which will make it increasingly difficult to work on flood defenses, and more people are going to live under sea level in dangerous areas. We have more intense rainfall from climate change. We have more summer droughts. We might expect decreased river discharge in dry areas, in dry periods, and increased river discharge in wet periods. So basically, we are a delta under stress, and we have to get to work. So climate change is an additional threat, an additional threat to us all on this kind of work to keep our country dry. To find out what's happening in reality, what we should do, the government established a Delta Commission, which came in 2008 with a program and a conclusion saying that the threat is not acute, but measures to improve flood risk management of freshwater supply should be prepared urgently. So the basic message is, be cool. Don't panic, but start working. And we did. In 2010 we had the Delta Act, regulations about flood protection and supply of fresh water, including provisions for the Delta Fund, €1 billion a year, and a Delta program. And also the supervision was given to the Delta Program Commissioner, the special commissioner from the government. The key word in all this work is multi-level governance. We have the technology, we have the finance, but the governance is the new issue in this one. We have to work together to collect creative and innovative ideas, to practice joint fact-finding, also to combine with local developments, and to work on local development and strengthen them, and involve local stakeholders and build acceptance. The first Delta program was working on the Delta and had one aim, keeping the Netherlands a good, safe and attractive place to live and work for present and future generations. It had two goals: be safe, now and in the future, short term and long term, and the freshwater supply guaranteed and also in dry periods. The last edition is essential, also in dry periods, not only in wet periods but also in dry periods. It was working from three basic values: solidarity, flexibility and sustainability. Both people in low parts of the Netherlands and in the higher parts of the Netherlands should work together and pay together for keeping the country dry. And this was not an answer to a disaster, what we always did. First a disaster, and then take measurements to keep the land dry. But now we don't wait for a disaster, we start working ahead, in front, in advance, and to prevent or avoid a disaster. Adaptation in the Netherlands is not only about building infrastructure, but also working with nature. With soft solutions, sand nourishments, work on the coast. We have hard and soft things, dikes, sluices, but we also work with ecosystems, both in non-tidal and tidal areas. So it's all we bring together to keep it dry. And this is, like we said, it's a garden to work with. We can test all our initiatives and all our innovations in our own country to keep it dry. And we hope that we'll keep it dry. Sometimes it goes wrong, we know that. But by doing this, we think we make a strong flood defense and keep us land dry for now and in the future. Thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer.